And welcome to another edition of Trader Talk TV. Today we've got Andrew from Index in the office. Andrew, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to talk about header bidding. It's grown exponentially over the last 6 months, but there are a lot of vendors out there offering header bidding, and it's a big problem for publishers to manage all this. So we have Andrew in the office today to talk about this and talk about solutions around managing all this header bidding code on a page. So Andrew, just give us a quick overview of what you do at Index, and then we can jump straight into it.
Absolutely. So Index Exchange, we are a supply publisher focused exchange platform, no buy-side bias, 100% independent. Our focus is showing publishers a different lens of the market by implementing header tags adjacent to the ad server so that we can show publishers an unobfuscated view of what we believe the programmatic wallet truly says.
Okay, so header bidding.
Yep.
Huge growth, huge potential, but there's a lot of vendors out there offering that solution.
There's tons.
So you are working with some publishers on solutions around this. So
yes.
Today we'll talk about how you manage all those different header bidding tags on a page.
Yep.
And we'll talk about the differences of between the different options you have out there. So
sure.
Let's talk about your solution first, right? I believe you call it the wrapper.
Yes.
Yeah, they do say about wrappers. Guns don't kill people, rappers do, you know.
Strap a beat.
So let's talk about that first.
Sure.
Tell me what you're doing, how you work with publishers, and the solution you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just to preface it, as a publisher today, when it comes to header, you've kind of got two roads to go down. One road is directly integrating headers onto the site. Tends to be resource constrained in the sense that it requires site engineers to implement.
Yeah.
Not a lot of publishers have lots of engineering resource available, so it's created this dynamic where alternative solutions are being evaluated. We call our solution a wrapper. You can also refer to it as a container.
Yeah.
And then the alternative solution to ours would be mediation, and I'll kind of walk through both.
Yeah.
So in the idea of a wrapper tag to support the header, what we're doing is effectively taking the specs from third-party headers that are looking to implement on the publisher and implementing those headers exactly as they were intended. A lot of the specs from different header providers are very well documented. They have lots of features. Many of them support price encryption, which I think is going to become increasingly important. And they also support things for private marketplaces and guaranteed, which tends to be more advanced. So publishers want all those features to be accessible, and implementing the spec as it's designed allows us to do that.
And what's the price encryption mean?
This is an interesting one. The original header dynamic was built around the idea of a price in the clear being transmitted through the page head. So if you open up Firebug or something like that, you could literally look, if a solution was implemented without encrypted prices, you can see your value.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, okay.
So it's an interesting one because I think there's been some things written on unencrypted prices in the header. And if you think from a consumer perspective, the idea of your value being exposed, there could be potentially privacy concerns. From a marketer perspective, having your bidding strategy exposed.
Exactly. And
also potentially.
I've heard of some vendors in the US are taking that information and bundle into a product and sell it into agencies.
Yep. So I can kind of talk about how the two solutions differ in that regard.
Yeah, let's talk about the two solutions. Yeah, let's talk about so obviously two container tags.
Yes.
You've got the mediation, and then you've got this sort of neutral option.
Okay. So with mediation, I'll kind of just describe it as sort of a fan, where effectively you've got, let's say that this is the mediation solution and these are bidders. So let's just say this is exchange 1, this is exchange 2, maybe this is a retargeter, and let's say it's another exchange. So think of it as, with the mediation solution, this code is deployed in the header. The code's purpose is to fan requests out to exchanges or retargeters to solicit their bid, return the bids back to the solution, and then run a holistic auction. So one of the things that this requires is price, and price in the clear. So let's say that's $1, let's say that's $5. What it'll effectively do is take all the bids, pick the $5 winner. So down here, a $5 bid will then transmit to, let's just say, this is DFP. So basically, in the header, fanned out the bids, ran an auction. In the clear, determined based on price, the $5 winner was the winner. Push that one request into DFP. Because of that dynamic, a few things come to mind, one of which is there is a dependency on price in the clear in order to make this work. So if you're a marketer who's concerned about your strategy being exposed, could be a concern. The other concern here is all of these bids wait to push into the ad server until mediation has completed. So this guy may have bid in 20 milliseconds. This guy may have bid in, let's say, 150 milliseconds. The 20 millisecond bid actually waits, assuming that this clears at 150 to allow him to qualify. This bid will wait the whole 150 before it hits the ad server. So it's a bit of a difference. It's one of the requirements of mediation because you need to collect all the bids. So to kind of compare this to the wrapper scenario, we look at it as effectively a wrapper. So I'll just draw these squirrely brackets to represent we're wrapping JavaScript. The purpose of the squirrelies is just basically to represent what do we mean by wrapping. Wrapping's purpose is really twofold, one of which is to control latency. So we are timing every request, which I'll show, to sort of support the same thing that you see here, but in a slightly different way. And then there's reporting, not price-based, but more latency-based. So if the wrapper does time out a bidder, the publisher can get reporting on that so they can find ways to optimize. So then you'll basically have blocks of code. And let's just pretend that each of these blocks of code is a different provider. So
it's representing all the JavaScript on the page, basically, right?
Exactly. So these blocks of code quite literally come directly from the spec documents from the bidders. So we might have, our spec document. Maybe a Criteo has its spec document. Whoever has their different implementation guide. These are implemented exactly to spec. So there's no difference fundamentally in the way they're implemented. And then what's cool is the way they reach the ad server is just very different than this, where if we put DFP here, each one is given a direct path into the ad server. So if this responds in 50 milliseconds, this hits DFP. If this responds in 150 milliseconds, it hits DFP. If this takes 200 milliseconds, maybe these wrappers kill it so that it never disrupts the page load. And what's interesting about this is if you kind of contrast these two situations, there's a dependency in mediation for the solution to be perfectly timed to hit DFP before DFP renders. So imagine a scenario where, for whatever reason, due to latency or otherwise, instead of taking 150, it takes 200 milliseconds, and then DFP has gone and rendered. This guy, who bid really, really fast, never even got a shot to get in. In this situation, the guy who bids really fast will always get into the ad server, which is really important. Because reaching into the ad server is kind of a critical component of making sure your voice is heard in the holistic auction.
So this has obviously got another layer, right?
Yeah.
So you've all these different people. Here's DFP.
Yes.
You have your sort of line item in DFP, which sort of controls the header bidding effectively.
Sure.
These bids come in, the bid has to go through this layer here.
Yeah.
So there's just another layer on top of a layer, basically.
It's another layer on top of a layer.
And does that cause some kind of latency, or will it certainly kind of slow the page loads down and obviously affect user experience?
Well, there would be a cost because there's two things going on. So if you kind of contrast the two examples, we still have independent hits going to each bidder, which we have in this example, but we also have a mediation layer running, which is going to require its own cost. I'm not going to say is there another
percent, is there another cost here? So mediation saying we're going to take 5% or 10%
Oh no, there's no fee. I mean cost is in latency.
Okay, right.
Mediation layers, as far as I know, much like wrappers, I don't think anyone's really making money with these solutions. The fundamental difference here is most of the mediation solutions available tend to be open source. And so for publishers that like to get their hands a little bit dirty, like to get into engineering, maybe they do have a lot of engineers, the solution is interesting because they can get right into it and they can kind of customize it to their will. The challenge that we find for publishers, particularly large publishers that aren't engineering focused with this solution, is it requires engineers to implement, whereas this solution is effectively built for you. So all these integrations are done in the event that the wrapper is acting in your behalf for you. So the publisher does not have to have engineering resource do any of the work to get these integrations done.
So this makes it easier for publishers to manage all the. This is a little more.
It's a little more involved, but it's also
just said, publishers have engineers maybe actually chuckle inside because that's a joke, really.
Some do.
Yeah, right. But so why have you built this? What's the use? What's the premise behind this? How does Index
sure.
Benefit from this?
So a couple things. The first one is, to be fair, we do support both, so we don't actually have an overriding preference. Yeah. Any publisher that goes with mediation, so maybe pre-bid, we can be one of these exchanges.
Yeah.
The reason we built this is we have publishers that can't implement this that want all the bidders.
Right.
And so to move the market forward, we responded with a solution so that the publisher that does have resource constraints, that doesn't have a lot of engineers, can get into the header quick. Long term, they might migrate to something like this, but in the short term, they wanted a solution to get them in quickly. But the other thing I would say that does require some evolution here is price encryption. So the interesting thing when you have a direct connect to the exchange is rather than sending a price like $1, you can just price a value. So let's say ABC.
Yeah.
Because we're passing key value pairs into the ad server becomes a translation layer. So you don't have to you don't have to pass prices in the clear. So we have buy-side partners who won't let us activate if we're in here. So if we do have a publisher who's implemented this kind of solution, we have to turn off certain bidders because they don't want their prices exposed. Whereas in this solution, we can always show theirs.
So do you think that, and it's a very good point because it's a competitive advantage to have a bidding strategy, particularly on the demand side.
Sure.
So you said the price encryption thing is actually a big use case for this specific option.
Because it's perfect in that sense. You can pass encrypted prices into the ad server, so all of our buyers are 100% supported here, whereas we lose a few here that have concerns over price. And I think as more people understand how header bidding works and they start poking around with Firebug and then the DOM, there's probably going to be more pushback on clear text price in the header, just because it might be perceived by some to be a little creepy too.
Yeah. And how would a publisher use this then? I mean, is it just a line of code on the page, or is it how would obviously there's lots of vendors out there offering X, Y, and Z in terms of header bidding now, and there's loads of options.
Sure.
So how would they work with you in this specific area?
So think of it as the wrapper itself is self-contained. And then it manifests in just a single line. So the publisher is putting one line of code on the page, but not to minimize the work that's done. I've really oversimplified how you achieve these boxes.
Yeah.
To code to spec does require a lot of work, testing, engineering, because each individual publisher's CMS system, GPT implementation, and ad libraries can interfere with the bidders. So think of it as before this magical single line of code can be provided to the publisher, a lot of testing has to get done to make that work properly.
Okay. And is it out in the open at the minute? Is it available for European global publishers as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a production product that we widely deploy. And again, we do support the mediation pre-bid version. They just have pros and cons.
Right.
And there are publishers that use this that have engineers. It's just, I think, less common with the major media codes.
And obviously the price encryption thing is going to be a big thing. I mean, I've seen this yourself where you just look and go, okay, that's quite interesting. You just bid that much money for that impression. So yeah.
It is an interesting dynamic. The idea of a user seeing their value in the marketer's eyes, I think, is a dynamic we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
So.
And is this just for desktop, or are we talking about mobile as well, or are you sort of in the early stages? So
this is desktop, web,
right,
and video.
Okay.
Outstream or Instagram.
Okay. Well, Andrew, thank you for coming in to explain the difference between the difference between the container tags wrapper and mediation.
Yeah.
So we look forward to seeing it out in the open, and thank you again for coming in.
Thank you.
And that was Trade Talk TV, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.